recent obsession has been Expedition 33, and for a very good reason. Just follow me on this one because I promise it leads to magic. Expedition 33 has these really cool items called Pictos, and they provide stat bonuses and sometimes really good abilities and sometimes really wacky ones. Take the auto death Pictos, for example, where at the start of battle, your character that has this equipped just dies. Similar to magic cards that have really obscure abilities, at first glance, especially as newer players maybe do a format to the game, you just don't know how to use it. Expedition 33, however, gives you options such as characters doing an immense amount of damage upon death or giving other characters a boost on death as well. And I wanted to extrapolate this idea using weird cards that at first glance you may not know what their intended purpose is, but once you get into a specific format and a specific interaction, the card just gets wild. We're gonna go over 4 formats and 4 cards that I play, and if you like this type of video, let me know in the comment section down below. Specifically, if there is an interaction that I missed, then I would love to hear it about these cards. First things first, we got to talk about 100 card singleton. Let's talk about some commanders, specifically Oblivion Sower. And this card is 6 mana for a creature Eldrazi that says when you cast this spell, target opponent exiles the top 4 cards of their library. Then you may put any number of land cards that that player owns from exile onto the battlefield under your control. So on first glance, this just mills 4 cards and then you can grab any number of 4 lands from those exiled cards. But where things got interesting for me was from a recent tweet that I made out where I was just looking at some like random cards that came up, and Mudhole was one of them. Red and 2, it says target player removes all land cards in his or her graveyard from the game. So you just exile them, right? So I'm like, what is even the purpose of this? What is the broken thing you can do? And Pygoncy actually responded. I didn't even get it at first pass. Well, there's Oblivion Sower. And I'm like, wait, how does that work? Well, if you read Oblivion Sower, it says, then you may put any number of lands that player owns from exile, not just the cards milled or exiled from the top, and put them onto the battlefield under your control. And that's where the wheels started churning for me, because Oblivion Sower was a card that I had in my colorless Eldrazi deck. And I'm like, I just feel like this is so low stakes, but it's a little bit of ramp. It's a weaker type of deck. It's not even like something that you can recur with ETBs because it's an on cast trigger, but there are ways in Eldrazi to like copy stuff like that. So sure, when it comes to Oblivion Sower, now you can abuse it even more on kind of level 2 with something like Tasha's Hideous Laughter. Now, obviously this is going to work in colorless Eldrazi, but Tasha's Hideous Laughter, each opponent exiles cards from the top of their library until they've exiled a total converted mana cost of 20 or more. So if they just have a bunch of lands in exile, if you're able to get Oblivion Sower back to your hand or copy its triggers, you're going to be able to kind of point it at multiple people and take a bunch of lands from them. And Oblivion Sower can actually just be this insane ramp spell. So reading the text, reading the card explains the card, but sometimes you just don't get what it means on first pass. Oblivion Sower, really cool synergy, and honestly has me thinking on how to build around the card in my colorless Eldrazi deck, and how other cards have these type of effects where you don't really tend to find them now. A lot of times you have broken effects with limits now, where you have a lot more once per turn, or you have to tap this card or sacrifice this card. Whereas back then it was just like, oh, no one's ever going to do this. And they just made it an infinite mana sink. Or no one's ever going to do this, and they just made it a card that like costs a lot but a really weak activated ability, and people just started cheating that stuff out and then activating it, stuff like that. And this is just one of those things where I feel like, yes, it's not inherently broken, but like on first pass, like when you take a look through it, if you get that ability, there's so many ways where you can get lands out of your opponent's deck, exile a bunch of cards from your opponent, or just take advantage of them exiling things off of various commanders and then just play an Oblivion Sower for insane value. Next up, I want to talk about Pauper. This is in my thumbnail, by the way. Shout out to if you know whose channel is, by the way. If you're a Pauper watcher and you know whose channel this is, tag them down below. They are a great Pauper content creator. If you want to cheat, they're probably going to be linked in the description box. Shout out to David Royale. But Mass Vandal is the next one. Now, Mass Vandal, first glance, is a changeling, so it's any type. It's a really sweet card as well. It's a decent blocker, being a 1/3 for 2. When Mass Vandal enters the battlefield, you may exile a creature card from your graveyard. If you do, exile target artifact or enchantment an opponent controls. So you can hit the Bogles players, you can hit the Affinity players, and because artifacts are such a big engine in the Pauper format, just hitting artifact lands and stuff is pretty good value. Most decks generally at some point in the game have a target for this. There's very few decks that don't. Comes to Pauper Petitioners, Pauper Simic Mill. And in this deck, what you're looking for with Persistent Petitioners is to have a critical mass of advisors to be able to tap them down and mill your opponent out. Pretty simple. And it has a lot of resiliency when it comes to kind of milling yourself casting Nod of the Bone for the amount of creatures you have, and you have that anti-aggro burn tech. But what's great is Mass Vandal acts as a petitioner. Not only is it a main board way to get rid of artifacts and enchantments, you have main board hate against some of the top decks in the format, but also doubles up as an advisor for you to be able to get rid of your opponent's stuff. Now, notably, you have to exile a creature card from your graveyard, but if you're milling yourself, then you're going to be able to get there. And then eventually when you cast it, you do. And then even on turn 1, if you have a Generous Scent, you can cycle the Generous Scent, grab yourself a land. Generous Scent is now in your graveyard for your Mass Vandal to kind of use and kind of use from there. Now, Bellowing Crier is another enabler for it. You can draw a card, discard a card, you can discard a creature card, and then you can take it from there. Regardless of where it ultimately lands, there's a lot of cool things that you can do with Mass Vandal in the Pauper format. It's a relatively common use card, I would say, like especially in sideboards. Yes, there are going to be more efficient ways to use something like this, but if it comes to cards or decks that actively fill their graveyard, Mass Vandal is just like such a good lights out card, especially if you're able to get it back or reuse it multiple times. Mass Vandal, shout out to this card for just not only being an advisor, being a shapeshifter, but also just kind of providing that extra main board hate as an option in a format where having lights out cards like this can be really great against Grixis Affinity, 3-color decks. Being able to shut off 1 color for like a turn or two, not something that they're looking forward to. Personally, I wanted to shout out this list specifically just because they're playing Sibsig Appraiser, which is a zombie advisor. And it's a card that says when it enters, look at the top 2 cards of your library, put 1 into your hand and 1 into the graveyard. This is also another way to feed the Mass Vandal, but also to feed your Nod of the Bones and just dig deeper. Sibsig's actually like pretty sweet. And I want to try a petitioner league with this. Let me know in the comment section down below. I still owe y'all a kind of black based petitioners list, but let me know if you want to see that alongside the Sibsig Appraiser. Someone better comment it, and you find that person, leave a like on their comment. If that comment gets like 20-30 likes, I'll play this list. But regardless, now when it comes to the modern format, the interaction I specifically want to talk about is with a ability on a card that almost makes it uninteractable or uncounterable in a super sneaky way. Colossal Skyturtle is a very unassuming card at first. Enchantment creature, provides types in graveyard if it's in there, but it's a massive casting cost for a 6/5 with flying and ward 2. But it has 2 abilities on it. Channel, which says you just discard the card and pay its ability. It's like an activated ability of a creature in your hand. So it's not a triggered ability, and it's not a cast card for these abilities. It says return target creature card to its owner's hand for blue and 1 to discard this card, or return target card from your graveyard to your hand, discard this card. What's amazing about this is, again, it's not casting a card, it's using an ability, right? So it gets around many abilities that actually prevent you from doing this or would traditionally stop you from doing something like this. So if you had a Doughty Voidwalker up against a graveyard deck, you would be able to discard this card and return target creature card to its owner's hand, right? For very cheap, just for the 2. Or you can discard this card and return target card from a graveyard to your hand, which might actually be a Cascade card, because this card is used in Living End. Now, Living End is a deck that's been a combo in Modern for a very long time, centralized around the, the 1 card Living End that has no casting cost whatsoever. You can't cast this. It's not that its casting cost is 0. It's just there's no way to cast it. You have to put it on suspend for 3. Its converted mana cost is 0. Once you do get it off suspend, or you find a way to cast it untraditionally, each player exiles all creature cards from their graveyard, then sacrifices all creatures they control, right? So you set them into 2 piles. You lose everything you have, but then first you have to exile all creatures from your graveyard. Then you put the exiled cards onto the battlefield. And so you just get a mass reanimation. So the whole point of this deck is you cycle through a bunch of cards. You can put Endurance in your graveyard. You can put Curate and Mysteries in there just for 1. Street Rates you can cycle out. Generous Scent as well to get your lands. So you just cycle out through your whole deck and you reanimate your whole deck from there. What Colossal Skyturtle does is it provides main board hate against certain creatures that are just being too aggressive, certain hate pieces as well that exist main board. And traditionally, it also helps you reuse and refind different ways to cascade, because that front side says discard a card, channel. Colossal Skyturtle, return target creature card or return any card from your graveyard to your hand. That's going to allow you to return your Ardent Pleas. That's going to allow you to return your Shardless Agent, your cards that actually cascade through your deck to be able to ultimately win the game. Now, when it comes to using it anytime, there's no restriction on sorcery speed versus instant speed. You can use that at any time. So it's a really cool card that's like kind of unassuming, but has that main board way to just be that threat in this deck. You can Colossal Skyturtle, and it's a great threat to just have out. Like flying ward 2, it's uninteractable. It's not like it has any evasion, no trample or anything like that, but flying is good enough, right? It's a 6/5 in the air. And then while it's in your hand, it's an active spell that's like uncounterable that gives you some angles. Now, notably, this version of Living End is banned. There's a lot of great sideboard cards that you get in access to that. Main board endurances, some white cards out of the side, but you also have Ardent Plea, which is a great way to, like, if you only have one card to attack with, Exalted can matter. There's a world with it. But regardless, when it comes to using it in Living End, I just thought that something like Colossal Skyturtle is really cool. There's plenty of other cards that I could have used in this slot. I know I'm primarily a modern channel here, and I do some Pauper as well. Let me know, is there a card that you think is also super cool in Living End? If we do this series again, I do want to bring about more cards when it comes to modern. Regardless, the last format that I played that I want to talk about specifically is the Legacy format. Now, the Legacy format has Magic's history of cards, differentiated from Vintage, from having a ban list versus a restricted list, or there are banned cards in Vintage, but you know what I mean here. You take advantage of a restricted list in Vintage. In Legacy, with Magic's history, there's going to be a lot of broken things that you can do. And the metagame itself lends to that. Right now, one of the top decks is Oops All Spells. And that's a deck that I have a little bit of familiarity with, just being a combo deck, being a spy-based deck for all my Pauper lovers out there. Oops All Spells has two very interesting parts to it that I want to point out. There's a lot of cool parts to it. There's a lot of weird, janky things happening in this deck to make it work. It's a very simple deck to play, honestly. Like, it's really complicated in terms of its interactions, but to play out and do really well with, it's not that hard, unfortunately. So it's a very like looked down on deck. But generally the purpose is, it's a deck that could consistently, keyword is consistently, win on turn 1, if not with protection backup, counter magic, duress, some type of effect like that, Thoughtseize, whatever it is. And the key is you have Balustrade Spy and Undercity Informer. You mill out your deck and you're going to somehow reanimate Thassa's Oracle. That's it. Okay, that's the point of the deck. You make a bunch of mana through rituals, you cast your Balustrade Spy or Undercity Informer, and you win through there. The key is, because this is a top deck in the metagame, Undercity Informer is actually kind of funny in the mirror, because Undercity Informer allows you to, pay 1, sacrifice this creature, and then say target player reveals cards from the top of their library until they reveal a land, put those cards in your graveyard. If you're on the play, you can actually Undercity Informer to then just mill your opponent if you know that they have, for example, graveyard hate. So if your opponent is Oops All Spells, and they play a Leyline of the Void, or you're kind of expecting maybe like Fairy Macabre. They probably don't have Fairy Macabre. I'm just giving examples of cards that exist as graveyard hate, and you don't have that answer. If you're playing against Oops, you can play Undercity Informer on the play, just power it out, and then sacrifice it to get your opponent to mill out. Then they have no mana, and they're just not going to be able to min. They're going to win. They're going to draw from an empty library. Now, of course, there's ways around that. The deck has Elvish Spirit Guide and Simian Spirit Guide, and with that mana on their upkeep, what they can actually do is then cast something like Memory's Journey. But how do they do that? Well, Memory's Journey is a card that says target player shuffles up to 3 cards from his or her library and puts it from their graveyard and puts it into their deck. So that's a way they can beat Undercity Informer, but it's just not like a common way to do so. Chances are they may not have it, and it's kind of a funny play. With that though, they have to flashback it for green. So that's why I wanted to point out Jack-O-Lantern as well. An unassuming card that does so much in this deck. What it does, in the graveyard, you can pay 1 and exile Jack-O-Lantern from your graveyard to add 1 mana of any color. Essentially filter out. You can take 1 mana, turn it into another mana of any color. So what you could do is, in response to the Undercity Informer on your upkeep, so you mill out, on your upkeep, you can sacrifice your own Jack-O-Lantern that you have in your graveyard, flashback the Memory's Journey, and set your deck up in such a way where you can get the win with 3 cards left over. That's kind of funny. That's an option. Regardless, Undercity Informer, funny in the mirror against maybe something like Leyline of the Void, where it's just something that comes out on turn 0. Maybe you don't have the artifact hate and you can meme out against that one specific scenario. But then also, Jack-O-Lantern exists in both decks as an out to it. So Jack-O-Lantern exists not only as an out in the mirror, but also as a way to beat Surgical Extraction, beat Fairy Macabre. If you have extra mana, mana, you can filter it into the Memories Journey to shuffle back in the cards that they're targeting with Very Macabre or Surgical Extraction. Yes, this does set you back because the Memories Journey doesn't draw you any cards, but you set yourself up from the top of your deck, A, to not lose from drawing on your turn, but B, to also somehow find yourself a win. So shout out to those two cards that are just being played in really unassuming ways, provide so much value. Like Jack-o'-lantern, not printed anywhere else, printed in Midnight Hunt, a card that like Lowkey is giving this deck so many legs to stand on in terms of the way it filters. It has value in Pauper as well because it is a common. It's not the most necessary thing. It's not like Fairy Macabre is all over the place and One Land Spy is all over the place, but Jack-o'-lantern is kind of funny in that as well. So those are my interactions that I wanted to talk about when it came to Oops All Spells and the Legacy format. Let me know what you think about these 4 cards that I wanted to point out. Cool cards that have really cool interactions, whether, you know, reading through the card itself, extra synergies, and uses that were just not intended when it was originally printed. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Let me know if I misspoke at any point. Let me know if I missed an interaction maybe with some of the cards that I mentioned. And let me know if you want to see this type of video again. I don't mind doing it every so often. There are so many cool interactions that I come across every so often that not everyone is aware of. And I just love to share a little bit of the fun pizzazz that exists in the magic of Magic the Gathering.